This
application
conference
within
will now
three
be
to
recorded.
within 3 4 months. But the data, it should be important. Once you lose any particular registered user information, you cannot ask the same user to register again, right? So because the data is the most important thing among these three layers. Okay, so among these three layers we will go one by one. So the first one is the presentation layer. So to build your presentation layer applications or client applications, so what are the technologies we can use and what are the tools we need and how to make that application up and running. So we will discuss those details. So to build a presentation layer or any client application, we need some technology and we need some tools and we need to do some testing. So whether that application, whatever you develop, it is working perfectly or not. So we need to do some testing as well. Okay, so as it's a full stack development with Angular, so you need a Angular framework which is developed by Google. So Google developed this Angular framework. So you need to use this Angular framework to develop the client application. So apart from the Angular framework, you need TypeScript. So TypeScript is the language which Angular framework is using internally. So all the code which they are writing for the Angular framework, they are using TypeScript as a language. So how, if you want to develop any Spring Boot application, how they are using this Java as the language, similarly TypeScript is the language to develop any Angular application. Okay, so TypeScript is a, it is a some matured version of JavaScript. So they are mostly similar. JavaScript and TypeScript are mostly similar, but TypeScript will have some more features and advantages compared to JavaScript. Okay, so and why this TypeScript came into picture? So Microsoft is developed this TypeScript framework, TypeScript language, because earlier JavaScript framework is not getting proper updates timely. So the JavaScript framework is not getting the updates in time and they are not adding the features on time. So that's why Microsoft came with a some better version of JavaScript that is called TypeScript. Okay, and for the client side, you need a HTML language because a browser, any browser will understand only HTML language. So how your computer understands like binary data, similarly your browser understands only HTML data. Suppose if you check this application, if you do a right click and if you click on this view page source, it will start with the HTML. So how it is looking, that is not the actual code we'll write. So but if you see this, so this is the code which is responsible for displaying your page like this. Okay, so your code, your browser will understand only HTML language. Okay, so your browser understand only HTML language. So we are going to cover the HTML language, and so CSS and Bootstrap. Okay, CSS means cascading style sheets. Means, so in this particular page, you have your Gmail has a bigger font and your messages has a bold font. If you see this message, it will have a normal font, and your text area is this much size, and your button has this much width. And when I mouse over this button, it is highlighting. So all this will be done by your cascading style sheet. That is nothing but CSS. We can achieve all these effects using CSS. And when you click on this particular compose button, it is opening a pop-up, right? So this will be done by your JavaScript or TypeScript. So these events, this is called event. If you are clicking on a button, that is called event. When you click on a particular button, that will be identify your JavaScript code. Okay, so we are going to cover CSS and what is Bootstrap. So it is a matured version of CSS and HTML. So Bootstrap is a it's also a framework. It provides like ready to use templates. So if you want to create a web application, client application, so this Bootstrap provides ready-made code. You can use some. It will provide some left navigation, right navigation. It will provide the top header. So if you see this, it is a header, and there will be some footer down. So this Bootstrap will provide all those ready-made templates any client application can use. So we are going to cover this Bootstrap as well. So these are the languages we need to develop any client application. Okay. So if you have a language and if you want to write that language, you need some tool, right? So how you will write your Java code in a Notepad or TextPad or Eclipse or any RAD or NetBeans IDE. Similarly, you need a tool to write your code, right? So to develop any Angular, to write any Angular code or any client application, there are some tools which are better to use along with when you are developing this client application. That is, one is Microsoft Visual Studio Code. So this is the editor where we are going to write the code for your client application. Okay, and once you develop the code, you need a server to deploy your application, right? So this is the server, Webpack server, which is provided by the Angular framework by default. You can use this server to deploy your client code. And so this is the npm node package manager. So it is nothing but it will download all the packages which are required for any client application. So it's like a maven. If you know maven in Java, maven or gradle or groovy, it is similar to npm is similar to those. So in the client side, it will manage all the dependencies which are required for a particular client application. Okay, so node.js is the like this is the main environment. It will contain the npm, and so you'll be using this node.js server to start your to run your applications. Okay, so once you are ready with the application, you need to test that application, because once the developer is completed the coding, it will be developer is doing unit testing, and after that it will be moved to IT to do the SIT testing, system integration testing. Once the SIT is done, they will move the code to QV. In the QV, they will be doing the UAT testing, user acceptance testing. And once it is done, they will move the application to production. Means it is available to all. So as a developer, you need to write your unit test cases for your application. So SIT and UAT, we are not responsible, but the unit test cases we need to write ourselves. For every method, every class you are going to write, you need to have a unit test case for that particular method. So to write the unit test cases for your client application, we are going to use JTest and Karma framework. So these two frameworks we are going to use. So JTest is the language, Karma is the tool. So we can write the unit test cases using JTest framework or Jasmine framework. And once you write the test cases, those test cases we can deploy to it. We can run those test cases using this Karma tool. So Karma is a tool, Jasmine is the framework. So how you will run your Java application using a JRE. Similarly, Karma is like JRE and Jasmine is like Java. Okay. So this is about the presentation layer, and these are the things we are going to cover as part of the presentation layer. And the next section is business layer. So in this business layer, so whatever the client is sending, client will be always interacting your business layer to do any operation. Suppose if it has to register a new user, if it has to create a new user, or if the client application wants to any user to log in, or if I click on any message, if I click on any particular message here, so this particular message will be displayed with that complete message, right? So every time to get this data, your client application will be contacting with the business layer, and business layer will take some values like which particular mail you want, which particular action you're doing. So based on that, your business layer will provide the data back to the client. So the client will take the data and it will display in the proper format. Okay, so all the business logic, everything will be happen in the business layer. So in the business layer, mainly we are going to use Spring Boot application. So Spring Boot is a framework developed by a Spring organization. So as part of this Spring framework, there are so many modules. So among them, we are going to cover core module, MSC module, and a boot module, and REST module, and JDBC template and data repository modules. And we are going to discuss about this AOP and security management, how to provide security to our application, and what is AOP, aspected oriented programmer. These things also will cover as part of the business layer. And the main language we are going to use core Java. So because Spring for the Spring Boot application also we'll be using Java as the main language. So you can develop the Spring Boot application with some other languages as well, but we are going to use Java as the main language to develop the Spring Boot application. And the tools we are going to use is, so the all the code we are going to write in editor. That editor is Eclipse. And once you write the code, to make to build your code means to generate the respective and files which can be deployed to the server. That files will be generated by using this Maven tool. So Maven is a build tool. It will it will generate the jars and vars and ER files to deploy into the server. Okay, so it will compile your code, and it will perform the unit testing. It will do the execute unit test cases, and it will generate the jars, and those jars will be, we can deploy to the server. So the server we are going to use to deploy the uh, Java Spring application is Tomcat server. So this is the web server. So this web server we're going to use to deploy our Spring application. And we are going to use the latest JDK version, that is 17. So I think latest version is 20, but we are going to use 17. So because this is the stable one for now. So if I find that JDK 20 is the more suitable, then we are going to use the JDK 20. Okay, so these are the tools we are going to use for the business layer. And for the testing purpose, we are going to use JUnit framework while writing the JUnit test cases for your application. We are going to use JUnit, Mockito, PowerMock. So these are all the jars or APIs we can use to write our JUnit cases in a better way. Okay, so as a developer, you have to write your JUnit test cases for the code you are writing. Suppose if you develop any search functionality for your application, suppose if you see this Gmail, there is a search mail option. So this is some search functionality. Suppose if you search for any mail which is coming from some Facebook. Okay, so I have a one that is coming from this Git branch. Something they have some Facebook value somewhere. I think that's what it is showing this here. I think here it has a Facebook link. So the search is working. It will search for the respective keyword in all your mails. So if you develop your search functionality as part of the code, you have to write unit test cases for that particular functionality. So whether that is working fine or not. So that to write that unit test cases, we can use JUnit with Mockito or PowerMock, and this is for the normal Java applications. But for Spring Boot and Spring MEC applications, we can use Spring Test Framework. So it is more advanced one compared to JUnit. So we'll be covering this as well as part of the business layer development. So we are going to use the Spring Boot with REST services and the data repository to connect to the database, and you will be using these tools to develop your application. And the third layer is database. So in this database layer, we will be using a database, whether we will use a MySQL community server or NoSQL database, means like MongoDB. So there will be any database server installed. In case of MongoDB, it's a in-memory servers. If you have memory, that is fine. You can use this server. If you have memory in your system, you can use this MongoDB. So, but MySQL community server is different. So you need to install this particular MySQL community server in your system, and you have to do everything in this particular community server. Okay, so the technologies we are going to use: SQL, structured query language, and say SQL for MySQL, and NoSQL means for MongoDB. It's like it's not your normal traditional SQL language. We can use Java objects, like object name based queries. We can write object name based queries. Okay, and JPQL is somewhat, it is completely avoid writing your native SQL queries. We can write JPL queries, because suppose right now you're using a MySQL community server in your application. So in future, your company decided to use a new database which came recently and which is very popular, and it is the most efficient one. So if your company want to switch from MySQL to some other database, if you write your queries in the native SQL language, then that will be a very big problem. But if you use a JPQL in your business layer, then it has very minimal less changes in your migration. So now every application will use JPQL as the standard to for connecting to the databases. Okay, and so like we don't have any testing for the MySQL data, so we are not going to do any testing, test case, nothing for your database. And the tools we are going to use: MySQL Workbench or command line client, or you can use any like shell, MySQL shell to connect to the database. So that tools we will be using, and this is the database layer. And finally, so once your application is developed fully by the developers, it has to be deployed to the server, right? It has to be deployed to the production to be used by the end users. So for that, so we will need some other tools to achieve that extra functionalities. Okay, so all the code you will be writing, that will be stored in this Bitbucket. So this Bitbucket is a server. It will maintain all your source code. Suppose if you write your business logic and if you create a Spring Boot application, and if you keep that application in your local system, if something happens to your local system, then what will happen? You lost all the code, right? So in real time, in every company, they will have a SVN source code repository to keep the source code day by day. Every day they will push this code to this particular SVN repository. Okay, so if something happens to your system or anything, your code will be present in this central repository. So they will maintain a backup of your code day to day. So it's not like somebody can remove this code completely. It will be there as a backup somewhere. Okay, so it's like securing your code and storing your code permanently without affecting any other natural causes to delete that code. So this is the Bitbucket. It is a SVN repository which will be used to store the code. And this Git and source is the tools which will be used to perform some operations on this Bitbucket. So if you want to store the code in this Bitbucket, how you will store? We can use these tools to store the code into this Bitbucket repository. You can use this. You can use this tool, Git or source tree, to store your code into this Bitbucket repository. Okay, and Jenkins is the tool which will automate your deployment. So once you make any change to your code, that code will be, it will be built automatically. It will run the unit test cases. It will be deployed to your dev server. So all that automation will be done by your Jenkins. So this is normally called CI/CD pipeline. So this is Jenkins tool which can do that automation setup. So mainly this is to build your code and deploy the application to the server. So we can check out changes. What are the changes we made as part of the code? We can check that in the browser directly by accessing the application. You can check the changes. Okay, so Docker and OpenShift are the, so these are the tools how your application will be maintained in the server. So how to maintain, how to run your applications in the uh, like how to run your application. What is the how the what is the better way to run your application? how to manage the load. Suppose if your application is hit by nearly daily lakhs of users, so you should maintain that application. You have to maintain multiple applications of similar copies, because in order to accumulate the load, you have to maintain so many applications, so many servers. So all that can be achieved through Docker and OpenShift. Okay, so Docker is a tool. It will like earlier, the traditional deployment has so many issues. So maybe if your application is working in one system, if you take that application to some other system, it won't work. So to avoid that particular issue, the Docker is the best tool we can use. So Docker will keep all the softwares and application which needed to run a particular application, and it will create a image file. You can take that image file to anywhere. It will work as the same how it is working in your local system. So that is the main advantage of Docker. And OpenShift will be to maintain that applications, how many applications should be present currently running. If you have more load, you can increase the number of servers. If you don't have load, you can decrease the servers, and how to configure the dynamic values. So all this can be achieved through OpenShift. Okay, so these are the tools, additional tools we are going to use as part of the full stack development. And so, yeah, that's all we are going to cover as part of the full stack Java training. So we'll be discussing about the first. We are going to start with the SQL, because that is the uh, easy one to learn. SQL is the easy to learn. So after that, we will be starting with Core Java. So Core Java is, it has some more features. That's why you will feel uh, somewhat redundant. But if you learn the concepts of Core Java completely, then there is you have to spend very little effort on the Spring Boot side. Any MEC application you can learn easily, because the core Java concepts, whatever are which are there, those will be used everywhere. So if any new features, any new framework comes, it will internally use the core Java features. So among these all the technologies, core Java is the main thing. So you have to, at least you have to get a good understanding on the core Java. Okay, so we are going to cover all the Spring framework, how they are working, and the core Java, and so we'll use all these tools in our training. And and the database also, we'll be covering the MySQL database and how to connect, how to create different queries, tables, stored procedures, functions. We will cover all of them. And finally, we will use some of the tools to store the data. So we'll try to create a running application. End of this class, end of the training, we will try to create an application which will be working similar to this. Normally I will take this, there is one application which is provided by Google, that is Keep. So this is the Keep application which is developed by Google. So I will normally, in my training, I will try to create a similar application using this full stack technologies. Okay, so we will try to create a similar type of application like this, but not with full functionality, because if you want to develop this application with full functionality, it will take nearly 1 year. Okay, but we will try to create the application with the basic functionality. So like adding a note, deleting a note, updating a note. And so we will have this simple layout for this application. And end of the training, we will try to create a similar application like this. Okay, which this application will be accessing your client application, your business layer, and your database. All will be, we will be generating ourselves. Okay, so yeah, that's we are trying to do in the as part of the full stack training. So that's all I have. If anybody has any questions, they are free to ask. Any doubt, anything is fine. So maybe I missed my introduction because I'm on mute for some time. So my name is Satya, and I have nearly 13 years of experience into Java development. And I joined as a junior developer in some company, small company, and I worked for nearly uh, 4 to 5. only four companies, and four MNCs. And so I like to read myself, and so I'm programmer and trainer and mentor in my current company. So I'm happy to part of that programs, and apart from that, I will be like I will try to give the training outside. So this is my profile. Yeah. So any doubts, any questions you want to ask about this program, or anything you want to, which I'm missing to cover, anything additional you want to add? So the total course duration, it will be around 3 to 3.5 months, because that is a full stack development. So we need at least 3 months of your time to complete this. So mostly, if it is not three, mostly we'll cover within 3.5 months. Okay, you will not take more than the time. And yeah. So once you learn these basics, and if you are able to run the application, so you don't need any help from anyone to do your daily business tasks. If you join any company, you don't need any other person help to do your daily task. So I will definitely sure that like you will be able to do your setup yourself, and you will be able to identify the issue, and maybe you need some help in the business area, like how you that application is working. But the coding wise, you will be free to modify the code, and the tools, what are the tools you are using, mostly they will be using same tools or similar tools. So if you look for that for some time, then you will be able to work on that particular tool. Okay, so that's all I have. If you want to ask any question, then you're free to ask. We have 5 minutes time to clarify your doubts. So you'll close the call at 8:40. So in between, if you want any ask any questions, you're free to ask.
Um, Hey Satya, do you gonna cover JDBC and Hibernate processing? I saw
Yeah,
only core and all Spring related things there.
yeah. So when we start the training, so as part of the core Java, we'll cover JDBC API, and when we start the Spring framework, so first we will cover the Spring Core, Beans, and Context modules, and after that, as part of the Spring Core module, we will be covering the sorry, as part of the Spring MVC framework, we will be covering the JDBC template, because JDBC template is mostly they are using so many existing applications. So I want to cover the JDBC template as well, and as part of the Spring Boot application, we are going to cover the JPA framework, that is Spring Data Repository. So Spring Data Repository, it is internally using Hibernate. So Hibernate, if you want, I can give some two classes how exactly it works. But nowadays, it is not compulsory needed to know the Hibernate if you are using a data repository, because Hibernate is very huge and it has so many internal concepts, and it is very difficult to it will take time to learn all those things. That's why they came with data repository. And what are the features you have in Hibernate, they are internally using as part of the data repository, Spring Data Repository. Okay, so I worked on Hibernate for nearly 3 to 4 years, and the data repository from last 4 years. So I can feel that in my opinion, instead of using Hibernate, it's better to use data repository, because data repository, it is internally using the Hibernate features, and the data repository is easy to learn and easy to write. So that's why they came with this data repository. Okay.
Core Java means it gonna cover advanced Java also, right? Like streams, lambda expressions.
Yeah, so as part of core Java, we are going to cover all the whoops concepts, and like all the interfaces, abstract classes, and exception handling, collections, multi-threading, serialization, and apart from that, we'll be covering all the latest Java features like streams, functional interfaces, lambda expressions, method references, and we'll cover all those things as part of the core Java.
Okay.
So core Java will take some time. It will take nearly 20 to 25 classes to cover all those concepts. Any other doubts? But during this course, what, like, we have 3 months time, right? So daily at least you should keep a 4 hours time of your time to practice this code. So whatever you learn in the code, so you have to practice that code at least one time or at least two times. Because if you learn that code on that particular day, you will remember that code for your nearly, like, most of the time you will remember. But if you don't practice and if you come back to that same code, that will take some time to learn. So if you practice every day for these 3 months, like, it will be very easy for you to work directly on the application. So it don't require any additional effort or anything. So the main thing is you have to practice at least sometime every day on the class, like, wherever you have on that particular day, you have to practice for some time. So that way you will be like more insights into the concepts, and it will be easy for you to it will be easy for you during the development process. So that is my suggestion. So mostly nobody will follow. Myself also sometimes I will miss, but if you follow that, it is very it will give full advantage. Okay, any questions, anything you want to ask anybody? So as part of this training, we are going to show each and every tool how to install in your system and how to use that tool. And so we'll be taking like a step-by-step process mostly. So I will try to cover all the tools. So you will, like, directly you can follow the video and you can install in your system and you can do the practice. So because we are working on the mostly microservices applications and Angular client applications. So I know which topics are more important for you when you work on that particular application. So every framework, it will have a lot of features. It will have a lot of features. Mostly you will need some 60 to 65% features that are mainly used. So because if you learn these 60% of features, the other features you can learn, you can do a simple Google search and you can get that idea. So the features which you are discussing, if you learn them properly, then your, like, other features, you can do a simple Google search and you can get that code and you can use. Because Google is everywhere, anyone can access the Google. But what is your question and what you are expecting from the Google, that is main important, right? So what exactly you need from that at that point, that is important. So if you know what exactly you need, then you will be, Google will give the answers immediately. You can copy paste and you can use in your application. But you should know what exactly you need first. So that's why, like, if you concentrate on mainly on the main features which you'll be using and which are needed for the application, then remaining features or remaining other topics or anything, that you can simply, you will, like, if you see that code for some time, then you will understand what exactly is happening. Okay, so if nobody has no doubts, then I will close the call. uh, Thanks for joining. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you everyone.